Once you're in the 3x3 stage, you're on the home stretch. Here's some extra advice for your 3x3 stage as well as for your parity algorithms. Alrighty, so here are some tips for the 3x3 stage of the Yao method. I guess the first tip is that you should pretty much eliminate any pause between solving your last 2 or 3 edges and going into solving your first F2L pair. Because you're relying a lot on kind of muscle memory to solve the last 2 or potentially the last 3 edges, and you're only really looking for one F2L pair after that. You really don't have to be looking, or you should practice to not look at the last 2 edges or the last 3 edges, and instead look at where F2L pieces will end up as you're solving them. So here, in this example, right, we've got blue and orange there, blue and orange there, red and green there, and red and green there. So what I would do is do the flipping algorithm, so slice, flip, and replace. And I know that when I do that, these 2 green and red ones will end up in this position, and the corresponding corner is here. So I can just track that as I do it, and then go straight away and solve my first F2L pair, like that. One thing that I've seen people occasionally do is actually do the OLL parity algorithm before inserting their last F2L pair. So here we can clearly see that inserting this last F2L pair would result in a case where we only have one edge one edge oriented, and we'll have OLL parity. So what some people occasionally do, it has its advantages and disadvantages. It's something you can try out, especially if you know a lot of OLS, is to perform the OLL parity algorithm and then go ahead and insert the last pair. And if, for example, you get if you know a lot of VLS, or if you can get an easy VLS case, then that's useful. But yeah, it's just something to try out, just something a bit different. I don't think it's necessarily better or worse than just doing your last pair and then doing OLL parity before OLL. Another thing that can be quite handy is recognizing double parity and executing an algorithm that solves both parities at once. This is only really applicable when it's very easy to recognize. So in most cases, I probably wouldn't do this. But for example, here we have a case where we can see that these 2 edges are swapped, and then these 2 corners are in their correct positions, and the rest of the cube is solved around the back here. So we clearly have both OLL parity to flip this edge, as well as PLL parity to swap these 2. So instead of doing OLL parity and then doing PLL parity and then PLL, we can actually do a double parity algorithm and then just do PLL. And the double parity algorithm goes like this: R2, B2, R prime U2, R prime U2, B2, R prime B2, R B2, R prime B2, R2, B2, like that. And you probably would execute a lot of those Bs as Us. As we can see in that case, that eliminated our PLL parity, and all we have to do is just a J permutation. Another tip is to make sure that your OLLs and PLLs are appropriate for big cubes. So there are some OLL and PLL algorithms which are fairly straightforward to execute on a 3x3, but once there are more layers involved, they can become really, really awkward. So make sure you use PLL and OLL algorithms that you're comfortable using on a 4x4 and bigger cubes. Another tip is that sometimes you can be a little bit smarter about how you do PLL parity. So in this example, we have parity, we have PLL parity, and we can either do an algorithm to swap these 2 edges, or we can do an algorithm to swap these 2 edges. So obviously if we do the PLL parity algorithm from this angle, it swaps these 2, and doing it from this angle swaps these 2. Now, from here, there's clearly one better way to do it. And it would be to do it from this angle, because doing it from this angle would bring this blue edge over to here, and we'd get this big blue block as well as preserve this orange block. Whereas if we did it from this angle or this angle to swap these 2, then we would end up with a G permutation, because we would break up this block and also break up this block. So here we get a G permutation. However, if we do it from this angle, we get a J permutation, which is a lot easier to execute, especially on a big cube. There are many cases like this, and as you do more 4x4 solves and do more PLLs on 4x4, you'll become familiar with exactly where you should actually do your PLL algorithm swap, either these 2 or these 2, depending on which sort of case that you get.